The Olympic flame is set to light up Sochi in 6 months, but as the final touches are being added to the venues, calls to boycott the Winter Olympics are growing louder in some European countries and across the Atlantic too. The reason's got nothing to do with sport, though, but rather over a ban on homosexual propaganda to minors recently adopted by Russian lawmakers. There's some really strong views on this. We invited a panel of guests for a broad discussion on the matter. Artis Nisanawi is with me in the studio. I guess if you watch this, you'll be very familiar with her. We've also got Dmitry Babich, the political analyst from the Voice of Russia. Good evening to you, sir. Very pleased as well that we've got Nikolai Alexeyev with us as well. He's a gay activist. He's also a head of Moscow Pride. He is live in Geneva. And we've got Ben Harris-Quinney from the Bow Group think tank, a conservative think tank who joins us from London. Guys, thank you all for being with us. We do appreciate your time and input over the next couple of minutes. I'd like to come to you first of all, though, Dmitry. I mean, the basic question here, we're seeing more and more calls here from gay rights activists and a number of others as well that the Games should be boycotted. Is that justified, in your view?
Well, I think it's not justified. Please understand me correctly. I am for gay rights. I think fighting for human rights and for gay rights is important. But we shouldn't confuse fight for gay rights and a political campaign. Let me just remind you, this law was adopted on the 11th of June this year, 2 months ago. And for the whole month and a half, there was no connection between this law and the Olympic Games made. Why? Because just nobody even thought about it. You know, the authors of this law didn't have Olympic Games in their mind in any way. And then, you know, this law was criticized in the Western press and in the Russian liberal press, but there was no linkage with the United States. And then suddenly, as if some kind of an order was given, in the end of July, all newspapers, all television stations in the West started to cover the future Olympic Games only in that context. So to my mind, this is a campaign, and a campaign has nothing to do with human rights.
It's been put forward as a clampdown on gays, but of course a lot of people abroad are seeing it as the touch paper, maybe the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like. Nobody's, I guess, arguing that about the actual law itself, about, you know, talking to minors and bringing them up properly, but it's the broader picture when they see pictures of gay rights activists being beaten in the streets, the police not seemingly coming in, or maybe Moscow Gay Pride, where they told the Cannibal Pride for 100 years.
The problem here, though, is misinformation. Yes, there are problems in Russia. Yes, there are hate crimes in Russia. They're not only against gays, by the way. That's a whole other issue. But the misinformation that is being portrayed in the Western media and the levels that it's going to here, I think, are really blowing this out of proportion to an unfair level for Russia, for the Olympics. And it's the athletes who are going to suffer if this does go through, if this campaign works.
And that's exactly true, because a lot of people fear that when gay athletes come to Sochi, they're going to be arrested. That's not true. There are several gay clubs operating in Sochi. And homosexuality has been decriminalized in Russia. Yes, there is a lot of prejudice. Yes, there is a lot of violence from private individuals against gay private individuals.
Let me just bring Nikolai Alexeyev now, a gay activist, as I said, and head of Moscow Pride. You're in Geneva there. Hi, Nikolai. I hope you can hear me. It's Kevin speaking to you here. I'm sure you've heard what's just been said there, and I'm sure you've got some views on it as well. Your gay pride was banned for the next 100 years here in Moscow.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. I mean, what I just saw and what I just heard in this discussion, that everything is fine in Russia and that, yes, there are some violations, but it's violations against everyone. I absolutely don't agree with this, because Russian authorities are banning Moscow Pride since 2006. It has been banned for 8 years. There is a clear European Court decision which says that it's contradictory to the European Convention. There is a clear decision in these gay propaganda laws against the regional law in Ryazan, and the UN Human Rights Commission said that it's contradictory to the Russian international obligations. And still, the Russian Foreign Office is continuing to say that we are abiding by the international obligations and that everything is fine. There is no such notions as sexual orientation and gender identity in the international human rights treaties, and this is absolutely not true.
But why target the Olympic Games to get your message across? Why target the Olympic Games? Is that the right avenue? I can appreciate you must feel frustrated, maybe, but calling for a boycott of the Olympics surely isn't the way forward, is it?
Well, I'm just personally not against the boycott of the Olympic Games, just because of one reason. Because it's absolutely technically not possible to realize this boycott, because it's not possible to transfer it somewhere else, because the only people who will suffer because of this boycott is the sportsmen who are participating in these competitions. That's why I'm against. But I am also against all the homophobia and the hypocrisy of the Russian state. And that's what I'm doing. We are fighting for this since 2005. And we think that the best solution in this case is to go and protest during the Olympic Games, to go to do the gay pride during the Olympic Games in Sochi, so that all the sportsmen can wear their rainbow pins, rainbow attributes, whatever they can, talk against during the press conferences, that the journalists and the media reports about what's going on in Russia during the Olympic Games. I think it will have a much bigger effect than just to go and to boycott the Olympic Games. I think this is more practical.
But there are people, Alexei, hi, it's Anissa here. There are people like Stephen Fry, who we've seen recently writing these open letters, and clearly, again, we talked about this over the weekend with you, painting a very, very different picture. That's putting it lightly. He compares it to Hitler and the Nazis. I mean, really, what do you say to the gay community around the world as someone who's Russian and knows that that is not the case?
I think that this law banning homosexual propaganda to minors, which was passed by the Russian parliament, became a sort of a symbol of the fight against the oppression in Russia.
But your argument is not with that law, sir, is it? Is your argument with that law per se?
Well, this law became the symbol of the fight against oppression in Russia and against the oppression of the LGBT people in Russia in the last 8 years, since we started this movement in 2005. And I think that Stephen Fry, without knowing all the details, of course, of the situation in Russia, is having his right to compare it with what he wants. Well, and I think that everyone knows the story of that in Nazi Germany. First of all, they came after socialists. After that, they came after trade unions. After that, they came after Jews. And after that, they came after me.
So you worry it's the thin end of the wedge. Nikolai,
and I can tell you that in...
I just want to bring in Ben Aris-Quinney from the Bow Group, a conservative think tank in London. We're talking about Stephen Fry, their well-known celebrity and writer, and the letter he wrote to the International Olympic Committee. Ben Aris, what do you think about this? Is the Olympics the right place to get the message across or not?
I think it is. I mean, first of all, we've got to remember that actually the United Kingdom had something called Section 28 in place until 2003, which was almost exactly the same as the recent law passed in Russia, which said that homosexuality should not be promoted in schools or to minors. So to compare this to Nazi Germany, I think is slightly hysterical. But I think in general, when you approach international sporting events, you either do so in the acknowledgement that other countries have a different approach, or unfortunately, I don't think you can take part. Great Britain, of course, took part in the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, where I think some people in Britain might say that there's a questionable human rights record in China. We also plan to take part in the upcoming World Cup in Qatar, and you know the Qataris have a very different view, I think, of what is appropriate in society than we do. And it's perfectly appropriate to go to those countries to have a respectful difference, I think, on those issues. Where there is an issue, I think, is if there's any thought that there might be danger to British citizens, either as athletes or spectators, in travelling to these venues. But I've seen no indication that there will be, and indeed Nikolai was just saying that there are two gay clubs in Sochi, and that no athletes would be unduly treated and no spectators would be unduly treated. So I think as long as that's not a concern, what the Russian government decides to do in terms of its domestic policy is frankly not really any of our business.
This really would be the first time that a boycott would be suggested in terms of domestic policy, not in terms of an international or foreign policy. And I think that an argument could be made that if it wasn't this law, it would be something else. At the first, there was the calls of the the ecologists that the land in Sochi is not, shouldn't be built on for the Olympics. Then it was the Syria intervention, that Russia's foreign policy about Syria not intervening, and now it's this. It could very well be something else by the time we get to the Olympics.
Of course, the International Olympic Committee, in its charter, is saying the mission of the International Olympic Committee is to oppose any political or commercial use of sport and athletes. So they're firmly against this boycott. Let's just go back to Nikolai Alexeyev now in Geneva. I mean, as time goes on here, are you any more hopeful that your message is going to get across? Do you think you've got more of the public behind you here?
I think the message will get across, and I think that the Russian authorities are just demonstrating that they have no unified position on the Olympic Games and how to deal with these protests against gay propaganda law. I think this situation will continue up to the opening of the Olympic Games. I think we still have to see a lot of comments from the Russian officials and the protests from the international organizations. I think the unified position with the IOC will be only done by the time of the opening of the Olympics.
Why is there no unified position?
And we are going to
I want to interrupt you here because there has been an announcement from the International Olympic Committee that says boycotting Sochi in 2014 would only serve to deprive the country's athletes from fulfilling their dreams of competing at an Olympic Games, something they have dedicated a great portion of their lives to accomplish. History has shown that boycotts do not solve anything but simply punish Olympic athletes, which essentially is what Nikolai said when he
Guys,
first
it's
came
such a
on.
pity we're going to wrap it here. We could do an hour show on this. We do appreciate all your input. Anissa now, Dmitry Babic, Nikolai Alexeyev and Ben Harris-Quinney there from the Bow Group in London. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. Hopefully we'll come back to you again soon.